International explorer, archaeologist, and author Jonathan Gray has traveled the world to gather data on ancient mysteries. Over the past 37 years, traveling in more than 30 countries, he has penetrated some largely unexplored areas, including parts of the Amazon headwaters. He has also led expeditions to the bottom of the sea and to remote mountain and desert regions of the world. In the course of his explorations, Jonathan began to uncover evidence of surprising, out-of-place artifacts. According to what he was taught at school, these were impossible. They simply should not exist. These were not just isolated anomalies. There was a global pattern to them, suggesting an ancient worldwide civilization of astonishing proportions. His book, Dead Men's Secrets, catalogs more than 1,000 pieces of evidence of a lost super science and technology, including dozens of achievements beyond our current knowledge. Archaeology fever first seized explorer Gray at the age of 10. He was intrigued by British explorer Percy Fawcett's amazing trek into the Amazon jungle. After reporting his discovery of a dead ancient vine-choked city, he went back in and vanished. Jonathan Gray, welcome back to the Global Freedom Report. You were with us about a year ago. Good to have you.
Thank you, Brent. It's good to be back with you today.
When most people, and I'm sorry to say this, but when most people think of archaeologists, Indiana Jones comes to mind. Is archaeology anything like what we have seen in the Indiana Jones movies with the intrigue and the treasure maps and underground caverns and discoveries of ancient temples and lost but not forgotten mysterious powers?
Well, Brent, you've raised an interesting question. As a whole, archaeology is just very humdrum, ordinary stuff. But there are moments when exciting things do happen and where people's lives are at stake. In my archaeological work, we've come across some fascinating things that we would never expect, and we've also met some dangerous people, and we've had to escape for our lives. So there's a little bit of both.
Wow, okay. It comes to mind as the big boulder rolling after him in the opening scene in Raiders when you tell me we had to escape with our lives. What happened to British explorer Percy Fawcett, whose story sparked your interest in archaeology?
Well, we don't know what happened to him for sure, but some natives who have been contacted in the jungle much later have appeared to have a few objects or souvenirs of things which he took in with him, like a watch or a bit of clothing or something like that. We still have no way of knowing exactly what happened to him and his son.
Wow, that's. Do we have any idea at this? This is many years later. Do we have any idea what his discovery was that he referred to, or anything of the sort? Is there any? Did you go down there?
Yes, I've been down there, not into the precise same area, but into an adjoining area. What Percy said he had found was a lost city, or rather a city that had been lost in time, covered over with the jungle, the vines creeping over all the big buildings and so on. And it was a dead city, no one living in it. Large stone buildings and walls, but the nearest life was a tribe of very short little people in the jungle nearby who had blowpipes and poisoned dart. And this is what he reported to the British Geographical Society. He wanted financial help to go back and prove what he'd found. They were rather sceptical, so ultimately he and his son went in alone, leaving his wife behind, poor lady. And the two of them disappeared, and she survived as possibly a widow all the time after that.
And did anybody try to go in and find them? I take it they did. Right.
Oh yes, there have been expeditions going in looking for him. They've usually, but they've all been unsuccessful, and usually disaster has struck in one way or another.
I tell you, I wouldn't underestimate those little people. They somehow they've got knowledge, they've got abilities that we just don't know about.
On my very first expedition, I went in from the eastern jungles of Ecuador into the largely unexplored headwaters of the Amazon. In fact, we walked off the map. The area we went into was totally blank on the map given to us at that time of that part of South America. And I had picked up a bulletproof vest from a police disposal store in San Francisco, and I had intentions of wearing that because I knew that these people could be a little bit dangerous. You walk into their villages, and if someone gets sick, they immediately cast suspicious eyes upon the stranger, and that may be the last place you'll ever be. However, we survived it, of course, but two of my carriers were these little fellows with blowpipes and poison darts. And when I went into their area, I learned that over the last 3 months, more than 100 of the native people in the villages there and surrounding had died in intertribal payback wars, based upon the very fact of one person getting sick and the witch doctor pointing the finger at some other village, and anyone in that village becomes a victim, and they keep paying each other back all the time. This is the kind of life these people live, a life of fear and mistrust. It's unfortunate because their ancestors, many of them say their ancestors lived in great shining cities and were very civilized people. And they don't know what civilization is, of course, but they have these legends of cities in which their ancestors lived where the lights never went out at night.
Wow. That is fascinating. Well, let's talk about a particular. I saw an article, and it kind of put my focus in this direction. A couple of years back, there was an archaeological dig in ancient India, what today we call Pakistan, which unearthed some amazing discoveries. Firstly, were you involved in that particular excavation?
No, I was not involved in that one, Brent, but I investigated it pretty thoroughly. If you're speaking of one where they found that the skeleton's radioactive, that's the one I'm referring to.
With the cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah. How old are those cities?
Those cities actually can be dated to round about 2000 BC.
Did you say 2000 or 3000?
2000.
2000, okay. Now, it's my understanding that these cities that were home to like over 1 million people that they unearthed. I mean, how can they be so sure of the number? It seems unbelievable that, what do you say, 2000 BC? That's so long ago, cities housed 1 million people.
Yes, one of those cities, Mohenjo-Daro, is believed to have housed 1 million people and probably was the first city that did. It's still speculative, but there seems to be good evidence that points to the fact that it was a very large city.
How do they determine it's that large? I mean, how do they know where the boundaries of such a city are? I understand. I am completely, the extent of my experience with archaeology is indeed the Indiana Jones movie.
Yes, it's quite a complicated thing to explain, but there are ways of estimating populations. The interesting thing about these two cities that you named is the fact that they had a very high sophistication. They started off from virgin soil with a totally high civilization. They didn't slowly evolve upward and by trial and error find out how to live. They started out at the very foundation levels of the cities can be examined, and archaeologists go from one level down to a lower level to a lower level to get to the earlier ages of the same city after a city has been destroyed once and people used to just rebuild on top of the rubble, smooth it all out, start again. And the lower down you go, the more sophisticated, this is a global phenomenon, the more sophisticated cities are found to be. And in the case of these cities in the Indus Valley of Pakistan, the lowest levels were the most sophisticated. And not only that, you had hot and cold running water taps. You had sewage system coming from outside each house and going through the streets.
Pardon me, Jonathan.
Just like we do today.
Pardon me, Jonathan. I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Ordinarily, the further down you go, the more primitive the building construct, correct?
No, it's the opposite. That's what we would expect it to be. The lower down you go, the more primitive, but it's actually the more sophisticated.
Is that's a standard, or is that only in this?
That's standard worldwide.
Oh, really? Oh, I thought I heard you wrong, because to me, if they build on top of the old one, it would seem the old one was on the bottom.
The old one is on the bottom, and that's the one that's more sophisticated than the one that's on top.
Fascinating. Now, in the particular case of this city where, you said it looks like it just sort of started as a sophisticated city, how do you explain that?
Well, if we look at make a comparison, my slant on archaeology is to make comparisons and patterns worldwide, and this has helped us to make some interesting discoveries that have been overlooked by others. If you compare this with Egypt, and you compare it also with Sumeria, the three of these civilizations started approximately at the same time. And they had so many points in common that it does appear they had a common origin. And that common origin can be traced by comparing and by dating. Now, it does appear that an X civilization was destroyed. Well, I call it X because we don't know what they call themselves, but it was destroyed, and the survivors of a destruction, which appears to have been global, started out and began again, but they had the knowledge. They had the knowledge of the civilization that was destroyed, and this enabled both Egypt and the Indus Valley and Sumeria, all of them, to start at the top, not at the bottom. We find that phenomenon is very interesting because they started about the same time. They all started with the best of everything.
So, in other words, what you're saying is that the explanation is there was some outside influence that helped these people in terms of giving them the knowledge that they used to start their cities.
What I'm really saying, Brent, is that the survivors of the destroyed civilization, which apparently was global, the survivors started out with that knowledge and passed it on to their descendants until there were enough people to initiate a redevelopment of the same culture that had earlier been destroyed.
Now, how does the discovery of ruins with working sewer systems and heated public baths and a range of technological wonders that we thought didn't exist so long ago, how does their discovery alter our overall thinking and analyses of past civilizations here on Earth?
Well, it certainly has altered mine to an amazing degree. I see that we did not start off primitive in civilization. There was not such a progression from a primitive state to a higher level, but rather man, as far back as we can go, was very intelligent. And our ancestors were able to accomplish much more in some respects than we are even doing today. I've been able to catalogue 64 ways in which the ancient world was ahead of us in our 21st century.
Can you name a couple?
Oh, yes. Well, where do we start? They had iron that never rusts. They had lighting that would go without replenishment, just keep on burning for hundreds of years. Today we need power stations and we need personnel to man them, and if that all goes, then our lights go out. But we've been finding the lights still burning from dead civilizations that have been gone 2,000 or 3,000 years, and the lights in the ruins are still burning, or were burning when they were first discovered in our own time.
That's amazing. Let's talk about, such a civilization going away. I mean, what happened? I understand the ruins at Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro are extremely radioactive, that thousands of years old skeletons they found are still radioactive today, on a par with the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Is that true?
Yes, that is true. Absolutely true. As a matter of fact, we do have ancient records that infer the events that took place that may have caused this radioactivity. We have an Indian record which states that a civilization nearby, and this is the general area where we find these two cities, that a civilization nearby was warned, the inhabitants were warned to get out within 7 days or to get out as quickly as they could, because within 7 days a missile was coming to destroy their city. And this is in the old Indian record.
In what languages are these? Is this information found?
They're in a Sanskrit type of language, which is related to Hindustani.
I'm sitting here and like my mouth is kind of open with one of those, oh my God, I had no idea. Just really amazing stuff here. I understand there was a discovery of charred ruins in the Indian mountains of Rajmahal and the Ganges, in which huge masses appeared fused together, kind of like they were welded. Now, what would have caused such an extreme heat in that region and during that time period? Are we talking about nuclear bombs and some kind of a thermonuclear war and destroying civilization?
What we're looking at here, if we look at the radiation as having come from above, it gels right in with the written writings which express that those areas were attacked by a power, an enemy power, who came to destroy. Another human civilization nearby that destroyed it.
Is that something that perhaps has evolved into fire and brimstone falling from the sky?
Atomic radiation and fire and brimstone actually are two different things. And I'll tell you how we know this. We've also been excavating down in the southern deserts of Israel, where we found the remains of 5 cities in the Dead Sea area, which have been turned totally to ash, and millions, I don't think I could be contradicted on this one, millions of balls of brimstone, which is sulfur, burnt sulfur, are found embedded within these ruins in southern Israel. This is quite different from buildings melting. In the case of the fire and brimstone, the buildings were actually turned straight to ash. Nothing was melted. Everything was made into ash. In the case of these atomic ones, the buildings still remain, but they've been melted.
With our technology today, can we look at, say, these radioactive skeletons or these welded pieces of stuff, and can we determine the type of radioactivity, the source that, oh yes, they had thermonuclear weapons, or do we have any way to do that? Do we know where the radiation came from?
Well, we can only know where the radiation came from by the fact that we've got physical remains, and we link those up with physical written records from way back. And the logical conclusion is that this was a man-made disaster.
But we can't kind of like reverse engineer and figure out what caused it specifically.
No, that would be very difficult. We'd only speculate on that.
I've seen a photo image, and I have to tell you, it's very disturbing. Because it shatters my illusions about what I thought I knew about the world. I've seen a photo image of what has been described as a piece of the wall inside the doorway to an ancient temple unearthed in the Indus Valley. Now, the images on the slab are unquestionably of various aircraft and seacraft. Are you familiar with these images?
Yes, and these kind of images are not just a single anomaly, Brent, and when we look at other parts of the world where similar images have been incised into rock, we find that there was a knowledge of something like this, which appears to have been a global knowledge. So it's not just an accident, that the accident of our imagination, it's a consistent pattern.
So that kind of maybe answers what I was going to ask, because what I wanted to ask you, because actually I've been showing this image to anybody who will look, this piece of the wall, and it's got an image of what looks like a submarine, what is unquestionably a helicopter, something that looks like Luke Skywalker's land speeder when he went out to find R2 in the first Star Wars movie. And these things, it's not like it's not like a Rorschach thing where I'm kind of making it up. They really look like that. And somebody said to me, well, in today's technology, anything can be Photoshopped. So do we know these images are real and not, for example, Photoshop?
Oh, yes, the images are real. A number of credible explorers have documented them at different times in different places. And better than that, not just images, but actual physical models have been found. In Egypt, in 3 Central American countries and also in Colombia and South America, physical models have been found of what, there's no question, were models of flying vehicles. As a matter of fact, life-size models had been made from these, and they show a superb knowledge of aerodynamics, and the models that have been made from these original models have actually been tested, and they do fly. They are able to fly. So this shows that there's no imagination involved in here. It's the laws of physics which are in operation.
And by the way, folks, I don't mean to monopolize Jonathan Gray. If you have a question or comment, now is the time to call, because we only got a few minutes left. 888-747-1968. That's 888-747-1968 to go on the air, ask a question, or make a comment to our guest. Also, if you're online, you can go to our live chat room at www.globalfreedomreport.com. Jonathan, if these images are real, and I do not doubt what you're telling me, then what do they tell us about ancient civilizations? For example, is the existence of a high-technology civilization thousands and thousands of years ago an example necessarily of an extraterrestrial visitation?
I think that what we see in the remains around the world today, there's no out-of-place artifact composed of, first of all, of material unknown to Earth. The technological makeup does conform with the development of our own modern civilization, and it does appear that in the human race there has been the ability to do this since the earliest times.
Is there any, you're an archaeologist, you study how civilizations have evolved and cultures and such. How does that happen? I mean, how does that happen from the very beginning? In the beginning, there was sophisticated
in the beginning, I believe man was created perfect. He just didn't evolve. He was created with a feeling for handcraft and technology, and there's nothing in archaeology or in science anywhere that tells us otherwise. Speculative theories, of course, come and go, and we have a very popular theory called the theory of evolution, but thousands of scientists today are abandoning this as they see the new evidence.
And I remember that you wrote a book in which you pretty much showed scientifically how the first portions of the book of Genesis, we had you on the show talking about that, were actually true. Why is it so difficult for the scientific world to at least be open to the possibility that we were all created?
Well, the evolutionary theory has become a religion so much so that people will hotly contest it, and it's a matter of a mindset rather than evidence. There's what shall we say, a system set in place that is very highly funded, and if a scientist wants to keep his job or retain his funding or his reputation, he has to toe the line, unfortunately. But there are enough scientists now who are honest men speaking up and turning their backs on this type of thinking and coming out and saying, yes, the evidence does show that we are intelligent, created beings, and that we've always been that way.
How do lay people become more involved in this or any other field of archaeology, such as tracing these ancient technologies? And how do people find out more about how to get your books?
Well, I do have a website, www.beforeus.com, and my email address is there if anyone wants to contact me with questions anytime, and I'm very happy to point them in the direction.
Excellent. And what would you say to somebody who said, "Hey, I want to get involved in these archaeological studies"? And where would you send them?
I would not send them to the normal university, because today that evolution theory, of course, rules. But I would say go to university if you like, learn the facts, but throw away the theories, and then get yourself beside an archaeologist who is out in the field, out in the front line. They're more reliable than the people who are sitting in ivory towers pontificating from their university chairs.
Speaks well for apprenticeship. That's excellent. Jonathan Gray, I want to thank you. This has been most enlightening, and I'm hopeful, and I'm pleased, and I'm also a bit stunned. But I really do believe it. Thank you so much for spending this time with us tonight. I look forward to having you back at some point in the future.
It's been a pleasure, Brent. Have a good day.
Thank you. And the website, one more time, is www.beforeus.com. Jonathan Gray has been my guest.